Hello, listener. Welcome to Juniverse Cheating Stories. Please subscribe for more videos.
It was supposed to be a night of celebration, one I had envisioned for years. Our son Ryan had achieved what so many only dream of. He was accepted into his dream university. After balancing grueling AP classes, a part-time job, and extracurricular activities, he had finally made it. This dinner at a top-tier steakhouse was a way to mark the beginning of his future. The moment where he stepped into a new chapter of his life. But as we raised our glasses to toast his success, the air shifted. The clinking of our glasses was drowned out by the sound of my mother's glass tapping sharply against her fork. I turned, half expecting something lighthearted. But the glint in her eyes told me otherwise. My heart skipped a beat as she stood, her lips curling into a self-satisfied grin. "I have an announcement," she said. I stared at her, my blood running cold. My father, sitting beside her, gave a silent nod of approval. My stomach turned, but I couldn't speak. "Max needs it more," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the table, as though she were doing us all a favor. "He's had a rough time, and this will really help him get back on track." My hands clenched under the table, my knuckles white. I felt the weight of the years of favoritism, the years of watching them bail Max out of one mess after another, while Ryan's accomplishments were always overlooked. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. I looked at Lucas, who had gone rigid beside me. His face was flushed with anger, his hand gripping his fork with a death-like intensity. Across from us, Ryan sat frozen, his face drained of color. My younger daughter, Ella, shifted in her seat, her confusion evident. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was an attempt to destroy everything Ryan had worked for. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as the words hung in the air, suffocating the room. Lucas, who had been silent until now, leaned back in his chair with an audible sigh. His voice was calm, almost too calm for the situation. "Funny you should say that," he muttered, his lips curving into a wry smile. "We moved the fund last month." My mother's eyes widened, her face losing all color. "What do you mean?" Her voice was tight with disbelief. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face was crimson now, her hand shaking as she gripped her glass. My father's jaw tightened, and his fist slammed onto the table, rattling the silverware. "You had no right," he shouted, his voice dripping with fury. "You really think we've been waiting for you to take something that wasn't yours to begin with?" I finally found my voice, the words escaping in a rush of anger. "Ryan earned that, not Max. And you think you can just take it from him?" My mother's voice dripped with venom as she leaned forward. "Ryan can take out loans like everyone else. It's not the end of the world." It was like a punch to the gut. For the first time, the full weight of what this meant hit me. They had never cared about Ryan. They had never truly seen him as family. Max had always been their golden child, and everything, even our children's futures, had been sacrificed for him. But this was the moment it became clear Ryan wasn't just an afterthought. He was nothing to them. Ryan stood up, his chair scraping violently across the floor. His voice was low, but filled with a raw emotion that made the room freeze. "I don't need anything from you. I don't need your money. I don't need you in my life." Lucas placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice firm but calm. "We don't owe them another second, son. Let's go." I stood too, my legs shaky but my resolve as firm as steel. "This is it," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "You've shown your true colors. We won't forget this." And with that, we left. The chaos behind us was deafening. My parents screamed after us, hurling insults, calling us ungrateful, accusing us of tearing the family apart. But as I looked at Ryan, his head held high, I knew that we had made the right decision. We would never forget how they had tried to tear apart everything our son had worked so hard for. The storm didn't stop there. What we hadn't anticipated was the lengths my parents would go to in order to regain control. The phone calls began immediately. My mother's voice screeched through the receiver, her words frantic and filled with a twisted sense of righteousness. She left message after message, accusing us of betraying the family. My father, on the other hand, resorted to threats, his voice a low growl as he fumed about us ruining everything. 2 days later, my brother reached out. "I don't know what's going on, but Max needs that money more than Ryan," he said, his words cold and accusing. "You're being selfish." I felt the blood rush to my face. How could he say that after everything my parents had done? But I stayed silent, knowing there was nothing left to say. Then, a week later, came the call that made my stomach drop. It was from Mark, the manager at our bank. His voice was unusually tense. "They tried to access Ryan's account," he said. "Who?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Your parents," Mark replied grimly. "They called, pretending to be you. Said there was an emergency, and they had permission to withdraw funds." I froze. "What?" "They tried to steal the money, but the bank flagged it and called me before anything happened." I couldn't breathe. How far would they go? They had no shame, no boundaries. I grabbed my phone and immediately dialed my father's number, my hands shaking with fury. When he answered, I let loose. "You tried to steal from us?" His response was chilling. "You left us no choice," he said, his voice cold and indifferent. "If you hadn't been so unreasonable, we wouldn't have had to do this." The audacity, the pure nerve of them. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. Instead, I hung up, feeling the weight of the destruction they had brought into our lives. Just when we thought we were free from their manipulative reach, the next blow came in the form of an envelope. It wasn't a bill, it wasn't a friendly letter, it was a legal document. A lawyer's letter claiming that my parents had co-funded Ryan's college savings and that we had illegally transferred the funds without their consent. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. I barely got the words out as I read aloud, my voice shaking. They're claiming they have rights to the fund because they contributed, once, years ago. Lucas, who had been standing beside me, froze. His brow furrowed in disbelief, and he gritted his teeth. I felt my world tilt. A $1,500 deposit, made over a decade ago, was now the anchor for this entire lawsuit. They were arguing that this one-time contribution gave them the power to dictate how the entire fund should be handled. I couldn't believe it. Their claim, laughable as it was, became the cornerstone of their attack. My parents, with the help of their lawyer, filed all the paperwork they needed, twisting the facts to suit their narrative. They argued that since they had contributed even a small amount to the fund, they had the right to decide its future. The audacity was mind-boggling. We fought back with everything we had. We dug up every single bank statement, every transfer record, every receipt from the past years. It took hours, days, and weeks, but we fought for what was ours. The courtroom battle was intense, the tension suffocating. In the end, we won. The judge ruled in our favor, granting us control of the fund. But the victory felt hollow. Despite the legal win, I knew one thing for sure: they weren't done. The battle wasn't over. It was only escalating. Just when we thought we could breathe again, a new nightmare surfaced. The IRS contacted us, and the words they spoke sent a chill through my spine. An anonymous tip had flagged us for tax fraud. The accusations they made were absurd. They claimed that we had hidden assets and misreported funds for years. Lucas and I exchanged a knowing look. There was no doubt in my mind who was behind this. My parents. They weren't just after the college fund anymore. They were trying to ruin us, destroy everything we had worked so hard to build. The investigation was long, brutal, and relentless. We spent countless hours digging through years of financial records, searching for any inconsistencies, all while the shadow of their accusations loomed over us. It felt like we were drowning. And it didn't stop with us. Ryan's future, the very thing my parents had already attempted to steal, was now in jeopardy. The university froze his scholarship funds, putting his entire education at risk. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about revenge. They weren't just trying to take something from us. They were trying to destroy our future. I had had enough. I was done playing nice. I made a decision that changed everything. I would fight fire with fire. I started digging into my parents' financials. I knew they had skeletons buried deep, and it didn't take long before I uncovered something that made my stomach turn. Years ago, Lucas had helped my parents set up a rental property investment, but it wasn't what they had led us to believe. They had been underreporting their rental income for years, evading taxes and pocketing money they shouldn't have. This was it. This was the leverage I needed. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and called my mother. "I know about the tax fraud," I said, my voice icy cold. "And if you don't drop this ridiculous case, I'll report it to the IRS." For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. There was a long pause on the other end before she whispered, "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I replied, the words sharp and unyielding. 2 days later, the IRS dropped their case. It was a small victory, but the relief was fleeting. My parents, relentless in their pursuit, sent Max to our house, drunk, violent, and holding a crowbar. His eyes were wide, wild, and desperate as he stumbled through the door, shouting for the money he believed was rightfully his. When he swung the crowbar toward us, my heart stopped. I thought for sure this was it. But Lucas acted fast, his instincts kicking in. With a swift motion, he knocked the weapon from Max's hand, sending it clattering across the floor. Max, disoriented and terrified, bolted from the house, leaving behind the wreckage of his anger. We called the police. By the time they arrived, Max was long gone, but the damage had been done. My parents bailed him out by morning. And before I could even process what had happened, my mother was on the phone again, her voice dripping with venom. "You've gone too far," she hissed. "You had him arrested." I couldn't hold back the bitterness in my laugh. "He broke into our home with a weapon. That's on him, not me." She fell silent for a moment, then spoke with a chilling finality. "You'll regret this." For the first time, I truly believed she meant it. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A few weeks later, my brother reached out, asking to meet. "It's gone too far," he said over the phone, his voice tired, worn down by everything that had happened. "Mom and Dad are a mess. Max is a mess. We need to figure this out." I almost hung up. How could he ask that after everything they'd done? But Lucas, ever the voice of reason, urged me to meet with him. This could be our chance to end it. We have to confront them, once and for all. When we sat down together, the air was thick with tension. My brother, who had been so passive throughout all of this, now seemed desperate to fix everything. But I knew there was no fixing this. Not now. Not after everything they had done. The battle lines had been drawn. My parents had crossed every boundary, destroyed everything they could. And now they wanted us to sweep it all under the rug? I wasn't so sure I could trust them anymore. But for the first time, I felt ready. Ready to fight back with everything I had. Our family would never be the same again, but neither would my parents. The war they had started had only just begun, and I was no longer afraid to finish it.